So in this lesson, we are going to look at content safety. This is another replacement service for image and text moderation. So we have seen that before, and I mentioned that it is an obsolete service. Any service can be obsolete at any point in time because, like I mentioned before, AI is very quickly evolving as we progress. At the time of this particular presentation especially. So this is a new content moderator, content safety, that's the name Microsoft has given to their service. Behaves pretty much exactly like content moderator. Let's have a look into it. So we are back to the main page of the Azure login or the Azure portal. And here we are going to look at content safety. This is like a replacement for content moderator, but it is not exactly the same API. But essentially, it is doing similar things as the content moderator. So to create one of these resources, what you can do is you can click on Azure AI services. These are all the services, and click on content safety. So in this case, I already have a content safety available on my free tier. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create one just to show you how to create. As you might have seen so far in the other resources, unless you're watching this particular video for the first time, it is exactly same as the other services. So I'm going to give a name. So right now I have my free tier available. You can select any of it. Right now I'm going with the free tier. So any of this, if not present, you can create, for example, resource group, create, now review and create. So all these things remains same for almost all the services which we are going to use. So I'm going to create one of these. So creating doesn't cost you anything, only if you use the API, call the API using the endpoint will have any charges. So the deployment is in progress. So the deployment succeeded. So go to resource. If we go to that resource, this is the resource we have created, content safety. And this is the endpoint. As usual, we are getting an endpoint and keys. So this is the endpoint and keys, which we'll be using in our code. Now, coming to the code. So this is the content safety example for image analysis. So the anatomy of the code is pretty much similar or exactly same. In this case, there's a function call. If you want, you can remove all these function calls and things like that and just start from the import. So this is taken from the MSDN sample. That's why it has a similar look. So basically, we are just calling analyze image function from the main script function or the main script. So a couple of things it checks in the content or in the image is hate, self-harm, and sexual severity, then violence. So slightly different from the output of content moderator, although it is getting done the same things. So there is exactly same output for text moderator as well, or text safety evaluator. So these are the imports which we need, and the main package which we need for content safety is this particular package, Azure AI Content Safety. So let me copy this to the clipboard and put it to the comment. So once you have that pip, all the rest of the things will come up. In case if you need any of this, all you need to do is to search in Google and type pip install. You should get the link in the first hit more than often. So Visual Studio Code is not really realizing that I do have this particular library. I already installed pip. Still it's showing I don't have it. I'm pretty sure if I restart the Visual Studio Code, it should work. And this underline, curly underline will go. But for the time being, what I'm going to do is I'm going to execute the code. So these are the imports which we need for content safety. And this is a key endpoint, and this is the image path. In this case, we are going to take some images from the disk. So this is the sample data which we are going to evaluate. So let's have a quick look at the sample data we are going to evaluate. So this is the code to read that particular file. So if you want to debug, you can debug. This is just a path finding logic to get the absolute path of this particular file right here. You can simply hard code the file location, the absolute path of the file location if you want. Now, what matters here is this particular line. This is where we are creating the SDK client for content safety, the content safety client. Pretty much after that, we are building the request like so. And we are using something called analyze image options to build the request. Then what we are doing is we are sending that request to the client which we have created here. So basically 3 lines of code. And analyze image options is nothing but we are creating the image data like this. We are just reading a file and putting that content into the image data. Basically, we are calling this client with this file content which we have created here. And what is the response we are getting? This is the response we are getting. So if you want, you can remove this try catch, but it's good to have try catch. If you don't know what is try catch, feel free to refer my Python training. There is a specific chapter about exception handling, but it is all about error handling. If there is some error comes here, what happens next? That's all about this lines. Now what matters to us is the response, and we are reading the response and planning to print it out. So like we always do, we are going to watch the response in the watch window. That's what we are going to do. Before that, we can look at the image. So content safety. So this is the samples we're going to look, and this is the sample data. So one of the data is this is a file, and the other file is the same file we have seen, that image of job hidden. So we have seen this image in case of the content moderator. Not sure if you have watched it, but we have seen this image, and this image is a new image we have added. You can try with different images. I would recommend you try with different images. Some of the images which has a lot of these things comes to the result, I cannot really present in a presentation like this. So feel free to experiment with a lot of images. In fact, this particular model works really well. It is well trained to do certain things, mainly what it is supposed to do. So try with different images which gives you different inputs. So the first image we are going to look is the job hidden image, which is this, and then we will look at a image which doesn't have any moderation applied. So as usual, I'm going to put breakpoint on the result. So here we will have the result. Start debugging. So let me close all the things which we don't need. See response, add to watch. So as usual, we are going to ignore this too and ignore all the ones which starts with the underscore. So we have 4 categories. Category analysis. Let me expand it a little bit. And category 1 is hate. The severity is 0. Hate has severity 0 in the first case. The second category is self-harm. Severity is again 0. This image has any hate or self-harm or anything like that. Now, sexual severity is 2. And you know what is the reason? Because the nature of the image. And that's why we have selected that image to see some value in the counter, one of the counters. Violence is again, there's no violence in the picture, but this model really works with violence. If you want to try some violent pictures from some news and things like that, this model really works. It is well trained to recognize violence. So it has done its job correctly. It doesn't have any kind of counter for the probability. The probability counter is not there. It's just giving a value called severity. So higher the value, higher the amount of that particular nature of the content. Rest of the code, we are simply printing it out. All the things, you can review it. I'll be sharing the code. So that is image analysis. Next is exactly same thing with text. So code is pretty similar, the same model and same endpoint and key. There is no change in also the imports as well. So we are creating a content safety client in the case of text as well. And here there is one difference, of course. So we have the text instead of the image. Last time we were giving image as part of the request. So this time it is analyze text options instead of image options. So that's the difference here in the sample, and the call is analyze text. Again, we are going to put breakpoint here. Again, the analysis is going to be on those categories we have seen: hate, self-harm, sexual violence, etc. So again, going to start debugging. So we got the result, the response, the variable is same. So I'm going to open it up. This is again category analysis. The output looks very similar. As you can see, it's very similar. So let me pull it up. So violence, severity 4. There's a high severity for violence because the text is this. So we are telling something very bad in the text. So this is the text which is being analyzed. So the violence is severity 4 pretty high. And hate is there as well. So there is hate in this particular sentence. There is hate. You can try other sentences as well. It is pretty good. Again, just like the image one. For example, it's not simply searching for the word kill or anything like that. I have tested all kind of permutations and combination. This model is it really understands the situation and then take a decision on that. Pretty good model in my testing so far. I didn't do extensive testing, but so far it really looking good. Now, if you ask me, can you use LLMs for this kind of things? Yes, you can use LLMs. You can use ChatGPT for all this kind of use cases with correct prompts. Using the correct prompt engineering, you can use LLMs. And I always say there is always room for specific models which are trained to do certain things. And I always prefer some of those models because they are more consistent in their responses and things like that, rather than a generic model which does everything. So it is the difference between master of something and jack of everything. So yeah, LLM can do something like this, but the response may not be these accurate because these models are trained to do exactly this, precisely this, and they should be good in that one particular thing. So we have seen content safety, very similar SDK for content safety as content moderation. It was doing almost similar things. Also, we have seen image as well as text moderation using content safety. Now, let's look into something called block list in the next lesson.